Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to take a look into Andrea Yates. Andrea Yates met shocking headlines in 2001 when she drowned her 5 children in a bathtub. To make some sense to this horrific story and what happened, let's find out who is Andrea Yates, what is her story, what caused her to commit this horrific crime, and is she the only responsible for what happened? But first, let's start from the beginning. Andrea was born on July 2nd, 1964 in Hallsville, Texas. She was the 5th of 5 children. Her father was Andrew Kennedy and her mother, Yuta Karen Tulloch Kennedy. Andrea graduated from Milby High School in Texas in 1982. She was class valedictorian, captain of the swim team, and an officer in the National Honor Society. But not everything was positive and perfect for Andrea when she was a teenager. She also suffered from bulimia and depression. After finishing high school, Andrea completed a 2-year pre-nursing program at the University of Houston Central Campus, and then she graduated from the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. Andrea worked as a nurse at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center from 1986 until 1994. She quit her job when she returned from maternity leave to stay at home with her baby Noah, her first son. After Andrea quit her job, she became isolated from the outside. In the summer of 1989, at the age of 25, Andrea met Russell Rusty Yates. Andrea's best friend Debbie described Andrea as someone who was naive and immature in the matters of love. If Andrea had a date with someone, she automatically assumed that the two of them would be dating. She was also described as a reserved person, but she was actually the one who initiated a conversation with Rusty. Andrea and Rusty spent most of their time studying religion, something that Rusty's mother would describe as a little bit cultish. After 4 years of dating, Rusty and Andrea got married and decided to have as many children as nature would allow, and this was because of their cultish religious beliefs. So, they bought a 4-bedroom house. Rusty, while he attended Auburn University, he met Michael Woroniecki, a traveling preacher minister who was known for his ministries on college campuses across the country, and he was also known for his extremist views. Rusty was actually the one who introduced Andrea to Woroniecki's sermons and his views. Until then, Andrea didn't have any interest whatsoever in religion. Andrea and Rusty were very much influenced by Woroniecki's sermons, especially Andrea, who became completely absorbed by his views to please Rusty. According to Woroniecki, a wife is a husband's servant. Everything Rusty wants, Rusty gets. Andrea obeyed and Rusty liked it. During their marriage, the Yates moved a few times. They went from Texas to Florida and from Florida to Texas. They also started living in an apartment, then they moved into a house, then into a trailer, then into a renovated bus, and then into a house again, but just because Andrea's family insisted. At the same time of the movings, their family grew because they were having children. And because the family was growing, their living conditions got worse, and so did Andrea's fragile mental health. Rusty and Andrea had 5 children together, 4 boys and 1 girl. Noah was born in 1994, John in 1995, Paul in 1997, Andrea suffered a miscarriage in 1998, Luke was born in 1999, and Mary was born in 2000. When Andrea gave birth to Noah in 1994, she decided that she would be a stay-at-home mom and then eventually homeschool her children. When Andrea became pregnant with her second child, she stopped jogging and swimming, and this made Andrea more reclusive than she already was. Andrea became obsessed with Michael Woroniecki's extremist views and how she perceived herself as a mother according to his views. He would say that the role of women is derived from the sin of Eve and that bad mothers who are going to hell create bad children who will go to hell. Andrea believed that she wasn't a good mother and that her children weren't developing correctly. They weren't righteous. When Andrea was with her friend Debbie, She noticed that Noah was behind school-wise because she compared him with another child of his age. So this for sure added to Andrea's belief of not being a good mother. And because Andrea wasn't a good mother, she was evil, and therefore the children couldn't be saved and they were doomed. So Andrea thought that she deserved to be punished. She also confided to one of her brothers that she started to have some thoughts about killing the children so she could save them. And she felt that they would burn in hell if she didn't kill them. Andrea at the time also believed that these thoughts came from Satan and that she was possessed by the devil. Andrea's struggles with her mental health started early. Like I mentioned before, when she was a teenager, she suffered from depression and bulimia. But mental illness was something that it was current in her family. Andrea, her father, her sister, one of her brothers suffered from depression, and her brother Brian was diagnosed with bipolar. But Andrea's decline was much more severe after she married Rusty and started to have children. So let's take a look. In 1998, Andrea told her husband that she felt depressed and overwhelmed, and Rusty told her to talk to her mother or a friend. And this might surprise you, but it's better for him to tell her, go talk to someone else, go talk to someone, than actually dismiss everything she was saying and feeling. In February 1999, after Luke was born, Andrea became severely depressed. In June 1999, Andrea tried to commit suicide by pill overdose. She was admitted to the Methodist Hospital, where she was diagnosed with a major depression disorder. She was then released and started to do treatment as an outpatient. In July 1999, she called Rusty to come home, and then she held a knife up to her neck, and then she asked Rusty to let her die. Andrea was admitted to Spring Shadows Glen against her wishes, and when she was there, she told the psychiatrist that she had visions and had heard voices since the birth of Noah, her first child. She is then given a cocktail of medication, which included Haldol. Haldol is an antipsychotic medication, and this helped Andrea improve a lot. And as you can see, 1999 was a complicated year for Andrea, mental-wise. It was extremely chaotic. I think this was a warning, a big warning for what was coming next. Under the supervision of her psychiatrist, Andrea and Rusty were advised not to have any more children because this would guarantee future psychotic depression. But in March 2000, Andrea stopped taking her medication and Rusty convinced her to conceive another child. In November 2000, Mary was born and Andrea seemed to cope well. However, in March 2001, Andrea's father passed away and she stopped taking her medication. She started cutting herself, reading the Bible obsessively, and she also stopped feeding Mary. March 2001, Andrea's state was so severe that she needed to be hospitalized again. She was described as catatonic, delusional, and she had bizarre thoughts. Andrea then started to be treated by another psychiatrist and she was placed on suicide watch. In April 2001, Andrea and Rusty asked for her to be discharged, and this was granted. And Andrea started to do treatment as an outpatient again. They also advised that Andrea should be with someone at all times and never left alone with her children. And this was a time when Rusty's mother came to help and stayed with Andrea. Rusty's mother noticed that Andrea would stare into space and she scratched her head until she created bald spots, and she also didn't eat. And in May 2001, Andrea was readmitted to Devereux and later discharged. She continued to take Haldol and she was suggested to do another type of therapy, which is electroconvulsion, but Rusty declined. After she was discharged for the second time, she started to take care of the children, but she was still withdrawn. Rusty then started to leave Andrea along with the children. He believed that it wouldn't cause any harm, and this was something that Andrea's psychiatrist told him not to do. On June 4th, 2001, Andrea told her psychiatrist that she didn't have any more suicidal thoughts or psychotic thoughts. And this is when they decided to talk about removing Haldol from her medication regimen. On June 18, 2001, Andrea once again informs her psychiatrist that she doesn't have suicidal thoughts or psychotic thoughts. However, on June 20th, 2001, after Rusty left for work, Andrea filled the tub with water. She then, beginning with Paul, she drowned her 3 youngest sons. She then placed them on the bed and covered with a sheet. Mary was left floating in the tub, and then Noah, the oldest one, asked what was wrong with Mary. He then realized what was going on, so he ran. But Andrea grabbed him. She put him in the tub, and she placed him underwater. He fought. He came for her twice, but she kept him underwater until Noah was dead, and she left him there. She then brought Mary and laid her in the arms of her brothers. I don't know what this seems to you, but the description of the killings for me, it seems so detached, so unemotional, so cold. At this time, I find it really hard to feel sorry for Andrea. What about you? After the killings, Andrea called 911. She asked for a police officer to come to her house. Then she called Rusty and told him to come home because all of the children were hurt. When the police arrived at the house, they discovered 4 dead children. They were wet, covered with a sheet, and they were lying on Andrea's bed. Andrea was described as someone who was quiet, unemotional. She was cooperative. She seemed worn out, and she was wet. Andrea confessed to drowning the children. She told the police, "I realized it was time to be punished for not being a good mother." She then was asked why she killed them, and she replied, "Because I didn't want them to be tormented by Satan like I was. It's something I was told to do, to kill them." She also said that the devil was inside of her and it was giving her directions about harming the children. Then she told her prison psychiatrist that she waited Rusty to leave before filling the tub with water because she knew that Rusty would have stopped her. In July 2001, Andrea was charged with 2 counts of capital murder and she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The trial began in February 2002, and during trial, several mental health experts who treated Andrea before and after the crime testified as to Andrea's state of mind at the time of the crime. But there's one psychiatrist that played a significant role during trial, and that is Dr. Park Dietz. Dr. Park Dietz was the only mental health expert who used to testify for the prosecution. He was a well-known, respected forensic psychiatrist. During trial, he testified that Andrea was psychotic on June 20th, but she knew right from wrong because Andrea indicated that her thoughts came from Satan. So if it came from Satan, she knew it was wrong. And this is a bit confusing to me because if she was psychotic, then she would have been delusional. So if you're delusional, do you think you can tell right from wrong? I'll leave this question to you. He also testified that if Andrea really believed that she was saving the children, she would have shared her plans with someone else, but she hid them. But I want to point out that Andrea told her brother that she had some thoughts about killing the children so she could save them. Dr. Dietz also said that if she really believed that Satan was going to harm the children, she would have called someone, the police or a pastor, or would have sent the children away. But I got the impression that Andrea was given directions by Satan. It wasn't Satan who was going to harm the children. And he also testified that Andrea covered the children with a sheet because she felt guilty and ashamed. Dr. Dietz was also a consultant for the TV show Law and Order, which Andrea was a fan and used to watch. And the defense team asked if there was an episode that dealt with postpartum depression or women's mental health. And Dr. Dietz responded that there was an episode of a woman with postpartum depression. She drowned her children in the bathtub and she was found insane. And this episode had aired shortly before the killings. In his final arguments, the prosecutor made a reference to Dr. Dietz's testimony regarding this episode of Law and Order. And basically he said that Andrea had seen this episode and she came to the conclusion that this was her way out. and the motive would have been spousal revenge. Andrea was found guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, and she was eligible for parole after 44 years. After the verdict, Andrea's counsel discovered that Dr. Deeds had given false testimony. The producer of the show Law & Order told Andrea's counsel that the episode that Dr. Deeds had mentioned didn't exist. This information was verified and turned out to be true, and then Dr. Deeds acknowledged his mistake. After presenting some documents showing that Dr. Deeds had given false testimony and the prosecutor knew this, Andrea's defense team filed for a mistrial, but the court denied it. On January 6, 2005, the Texas Court of Appeals reversed the conviction, and it stated that the jury might have been influenced by Dr. Deeds' false testimony, so it was necessary to have a new trial. On July 26, 2006, Andrea was found not guilty by reason of insanity as defined by the state of Texas, and that means they needed to prove that she couldn't tell right from wrong at the time of the crime. Of course, this case gained a lot of attention from the media, and then the media alleged that Michael Woroniecki had some responsibility for the killings because of his fire and brimstone message. And this was something that was denied by Rusty and Michael Woroniecki, and they both said that these allegations were made up by the media. But let's put this into perspective. Andrea was obsessed with Michael Woroniecki's sermons, and she followed them religiously to please Rusty because she was his servant. Following the guidelines of his sayings, it seems that Andrea didn't stand a chance, and she was doomed. Let's take a look. Andrea heard voices, so if she heard voices, she must have been possessed. So if she was possessed, then it must have been the devil. So she was evil. And if she was evil, she created bad children. So they go to hell. Andrea was obsessed with being a good mother and a good wife. So when she compared herself to what Woroniecki said about mothers and given that she was unable to reason, she was doomed, and so were her children. What do you think about this? Did Michael Woroniecki share some blame, or should people take accountability for the things that they choose to believe? Andrea's best friend, Debbie, described that there was a gradual change in Andrea from the time she married Rusty. She noticed that Rusty liked to be in control of everything, and gradually Andrea would just say whatever he wanted. Andrea was pressured to take care of the children and the house, and also meet Rusty's needs. Andrea also told Debbie that it was actually Rusty who wanted to have a lot of children. Rusty was very critical, he never said anything appreciative about Andrea, and he believed in total submission. Rusty also once told his mother-in-law that women were inferior. Debbie described Andrea as matronly, boyish, and she never wore makeup. However, do you see this photo? It doesn't look like Andrea, does it? This photo is a glamour shot that Andrea took at the mall, but when Andrea got home, Rusty criticized her makeup, he degraded her hair, and he didn't want Andrea to wear skirts. Debbie also noticed that Rusty always bought himself the best tools and computers, but when it came to Andrea's spendings, he was a cheap. He would have her buy the worst furniture, he would have her buy garage sale items, and cheap haircuts. Andrea was actually the one who had to cut the children's hair. Debbie also mentioned that Andrea never talked about loving Rusty. He was just a partner. Debbie and her husband believed that Rusty was trying to isolate from the family. He didn't want the children to be with other children, and he didn't want Andrea to have a relationship with Debbie, and Debbie also avoided Rusty. After the third child was born, Debbie noticed that there was a decline in Andrea. And also Rusty decided that they were too materialistic and liquidated everything. Debbie also mentioned that when Andrea was single, she took pride on the things that she was able to buy because she worked really hard to have her stuff. They sold all of their things at a garage sale, all of Andrea's belongings. But here's the thing. Rusty actually guarded his tools in a storage. How about that? On June 1999, Child Protective Services received a report alleging neglect, and this was a time when Andrea was admitted for trying to commit suicide for pill overdose. The intake worker reported that the living conditions were concerning and the children were at risk of harm. However, the case was closed. So let's talk about Andrea's mental health. Debbie told the police that Rusty didn't agree with the doctor's diagnosis and didn't agree that Andrea needed to take medication for a year to recover. He wasn't keen on drugs, he always thought that he was always right, and Debbie described him as being manipulative, controlling, and domineering. Before being hospitalized in 1999, Andrea asked Debbie if she thought that she was depressed, and Andrea and Rusty believed that she was possessed or demonized. Debbie said that Rusty didn't do anything to help Andrea. He didn't accept that Andrea was clinically depressed. He insisted that it was postpartum, it was nutritional, and he didn't trust psychiatrists. It was advised that Andrea would have a night out, but Rusty discouraged it. Rusty actually saw Andrea's depression as a character flaw, a weakness, allegedly. Debbie was also upset with the fact that Rusty pushed Andrea to avoid medication. Rusty claimed that her last psychiatrist was the one who was responsible for recognizing and treating Andrea's psychosis. Not Rusty, because he wasn't an expert. Also claimed that the psychiatrist refused to continue her medication regimen with Aldo, which had worked before. Rusty also added that Andrea shouldn't have been discharged in May 2001, but the hospital had no choice because of their insurance constraints. Here's the thing, why wasn't she committed as a long-term patient in 1999 if that year was so chaotic? Let's keep in mind, in April 2001, Rusty and Andrea asked for her to be discharged. Rusty, the non-expert, and his non-expert family claimed that a combination of antidepressants that were prescribed the day before were responsible for Andrea's violent psychotic behavior. However, in trial, there was an expert witness who contradicted this claim, saying that it wasn't uncommon practice and it had nothing to do with her re-emergent psychosis. He suggested that it was actually because Aldo was removed from her medication regimen 2 weeks before. Although they were advised by an expert not to leave Andrea alone, Rusty, the non-expert, announced in a family gathering that he would start leaving Andrea 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, where she wouldn't be dependent on him and his mother for her maternal responsibilities. In 2001, while transporting Andrea to Devereaux Treatment Facility, Rusty, the non-mental expert, told Brian, Andrea's brother, that all depressed people needed a swift kick in the pants to get motivated. Andrea, psychiatrist, the expert, advised the couple against having more children, but they conceived Mary, baby number 5. Rusty told the media that he was never told his wife was psychotic or would harm the children. If he had known, he would never have more children. However, Andrea told her prison psychiatrist that she told Rusty, the non-expert, she didn't want to have sex because she might harm the children. And Rusty, the non-expert, responded by asserting his procreation religious beliefs. He then manipulated Andrea into having sex by telling her she was a good mother and that she could handle having more children, even though an expert told him not to have more children. Then he lied about not knowing about it. I want to remind you that Rusty was also present in Andrea's doctor appointments, so he wasn't oblivious to what was happening. Also, during trial, Rusty maintained this idea that Andrea was going to be found not guilty and then they would have more children. It didn't matter how, but they would have more children. But eventually he let go of that idea. Rusty claimed that he never knew she was hearing voices. However, it was in her medical records since 1999. In August 2004, Rusty filed for divorce because he and Andrea had not lived together as a married couple since the day of the killings. He then married his second wife in 2006. They had one son, and she filed for divorce in 2015. According to Andrea's friend, Andrea was hurt by Rusty's decision to divorce her. What do you think about Rusty in all of this? It seems to me that Rusty's behavior and his contradictions were to deflect blame and remove himself from any possibility of being also held accountable for what happened. It was everybody else's fault, even though he made the decisions that he made as a non-expert. What do you think about this? Does he share some blame? Was he negligent? But here's the thing, I'm pretty sure that the day of the killings was Rusty's worst day in his life, for sure. So this is Andrea's story. It's a girl who grew up with great potential for success. She met a guy, got married, and everything derailed. Her mental history was a complete mess. It was so chaotic. And you have to wonder what was like with all that chaos in her head. I know some of you might ask about Dr. Saeed, the psychiatrist who removed Aldo from Andrea's regimen, but I got the impression, allegedly, that Andrea might have lied to the psychiatrist. Why? I don't know. And what about Andrea? Do you think Andrea was a cold killer and just simply guilty, or do you think that she was a victim of everything around her? And to end this, let's send peace, love, and light through eternity to the innocent Noah, Paul, John, Luke, and Mary. Don't forget to subscribe. Click that notification bell button. Thank you for watching. See you the next time. Stay safe.